Want to achieve network marketing success? Then you're in the right company. Hello, and welcome to Leave Nothing to Chance, hosted by networking marketing giant, John Solleder. Learn everything you need to know about the network marketing space from somebody who's actually done it. Join us every week for front row seats as we feature some of the finest and most successful personalities in network marketing. Leave nothing to chance. Join us now.
Well, it is beyond an honor to interview one of my idols in the direct selling industry and the sales world. Somebody who's just been so incredibly successful and inspirational, and just such a great leader for so long. And that's Mr. Ben Gay III. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, John. I appreciate it. And hello, Ron.
And
hello.
And of course, Mr. Ron Henley from the Network Marketing Historical Society, the curator, and our good friend who is really the world's leading authority on the network marketing history of this great industry that we've been all part of for so long. And that all of our, well, not all of our listeners, some of our listeners are in other areas of sales, but so many people listen and are, of course, know our industry. So, Ben, I just want to start. I don't even know where to start. I mean, how do you start with somebody that's had the career you've had? But I'll just start with where I can start to kind of summarize an amazing life, to say the least. And thank you so much once again for doing this. But, let's just start at the top. Every organization you've been the number one guy. I mean, that alone, speaks volumes, especially for as long as you've been doing what you've been doing. At 27, of course, Ben was the president of Holiday Magic, which at that time was the largest direct selling company in the world. He's the author of the series of books, The Closers. I first heard of you, Ben, way back. I just turned 62 weeks ago. I first heard of you when I was working with a mutual friend of ours, unfortunately passed away, Dale Maloney. And Dale used to mention you all the time, that you were the greatest salesperson he ever knew. And Dale wasn't too bad either. We were doing his Secrets of Selling seminars.
He wasn't.
He was something else, especially with the RV. He did well in multi-level, but he was a heck of an RV salesman, as we all know. And I actually used some of his things. I sold cars for a very short time in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, and I used some of Dale's techniques, and man, they worked. It was incredible. And to this day, I can't tell you the difference between a V8 and a V6, but I sold a lot of cars because of Dale's work. And it just goes back to something so fundamental that people like yourself have done, and which is to lay out a specific plan of what to do, how to do it, and get the job done. But I have to mention, because once again, you've worked with, many of my heroes, many of Ron's heroes, many of our listeners' heroes. I mean, just to say the least, here's a short list, and I'll ask you a little bit about each of them. J. Douglas Edwards, who I know is considered the grandfather of the modern sales world. Dr. Napoleon Hill himself, who was one of your mentors for 2 years, which is incredible. Earl Nightingale, who better? Greatest voice I think I've ever heard on the radio. William Penn Patrick, Zig Ziglar, and so many others. So, Ben, let's just kind of start there and talk a little bit briefly about about all of those gentlemen. And I guess let's just start with J. Douglas Edwards.
On a personal level, my theory is, in my long-running friendship with Ron, is that we'll tell the truth about things.
Okay.
and sort of go behind the magic table, because a lot of people standing in front of the magic table don't really know what's going on. First of all, my J. Douglas Edwards, this is a book I wrote for him after he died, Sales Closing Power, because he never wrote a book. And but it's true to my notes sitting in his seminars and to his recordings and so on. So when I say I wrote it, I was sort of the stenographer after the fact. Okay, J. Douglas Edwards, on a personal level, a complete jackass. On stage, really magnificent. Today he would look a little old-fashioned because he talked like a Broadway actor instead of the way we talk now, which is more conversational. And a lesson I learned, Dr. Napoleon Hill was sitting in my office one day in the Dr. Hill chair that nobody else would sit in. And Doug Edwards was in the office that day or that week or something. He walked by and I waved at him, And he went on, was out of earshot. And I said to Dr. Hill, I can't stand him. He is such a jackass. And Dr. Hill said, is he good on stage? I said, oh, yeah, he's great. He said, does he do what you ask him to do? Absolutely. Teach people sales training and so on. He says, well, keep hiring him on stage and don't invite him up to the house. And I went,
Great advice.
I get it. So that's pretty much what I did. And part of my personal discomfort with Doug came from him being up at the house, where you get to really know somebody, and he was hard to get off stage. And, Doug, how are you feeling today? Well, I'm often asked that by the 40,000 salespeople I have personally trained one-on-one, and no, I asked if you had a cold, something like that. And I know you want to zip through the list. If you want to double back, I've got other Doug Edwards stories. He was interesting character.
Well, give us one other one. Why not? We're on him. Let's talk a little bit more about him.
Sure.
Well, we were sitting, I don't remember where, but we had done a seminar, and I used to hire him to be in seminars and so on. And I forget where we were, but the seminar was over, and there were 8 or 10 of us in the dining room sitting around the table. And I was the youngest. I was president of the company of Holiday Magic at 25. Their number one distributor, about 23-ish. And so Zig, for instance, was 18 years older than I was. And although I hadn't met Dr. Hill yet, the day I met him, I was 25 and he was 84. He was old enough biologically to be my great-grandfather. And that was sort of typical. There was me, and the next youngest person generally was about 12 years older. And then it went up from there. So although I had been quite successful at that point, not as long as they had been, some of them, my views, except for I was the one that signed the check and hired them, were probably a little suspect, and I understand that. Here's this young kid and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I said something about selling, and Doug said, well, when you've been in selling as long as I've been in selling and so on, I'm thinking, you're working for me and calling to ask where the check is every few minutes. Remember the deodorant commercial, never let them see you sweat? Yeah. I could see Doug sweating. And my father always said, check a man's fingernails to see if he bites them, and check the heels of his shoes for income level and pride, see if they're worn down. Well, Doug bit his fingernails to the quick. I mean, back to where they bled. And that was among the first things I noticed, because my dad taught me to look for that. And then I backed up and looked at the heels of his shoes, and I could see why he was concerned where the check was. So from one end of the table to the other, we sort of go back and forth about my view of whatever the subject matter was. It really wasn't important. And finally, I said, well, Doug, look, here's what we can do. Hal Kraus with American Sales Masters was sitting at the table. I said, Hal, you know everybody in the sales world. Who in this town, we'll say Dallas, I don't remember where it was, who in this town do you know that has a product? And he named somebody, I think it was Electrolux vacuum cleaners or something. I said, well, Doug, here's the deal. You and I will each go get a vacuum cleaner from his friend, and we'll each get a lead. And the first man back here to the table with money or a check or whatever wins the debate. You want to do it? And he started shaking. I mean, literally shaking. And the blood sort of drained out of his face. And some other good friend at the table jumped in and eased the moment and said, well, we're not going to do that, but whatever. And you could see Doug's shoulders go. He was off the hook. Well, one lead, a product I don't know, and one lead, he could have we might have both come back with a check or both come back with nothing, or he could have won or I could have won. It was a coin toss, sort of stupid on my part. But what was interesting was the reaction. This person who'd been in selling and knew every mover and shaker in the sales world, and they all checked with him before they got out of bed in the morning, was afraid to be put on the spot and go sell something. And I was young enough and had failed enough already to not be afraid of hearing no. Used to hear no on a regular basis, so it didn't bother me. And I didn't have a reputation to defend,
Right.
so I guess it was less on the line for me. Plus youth and arrogance. I shouldn't have done it. But it doesn't take away me studying his reaction. Wasn't doing as well as he says he was, couldn't come up with specifics on his great sales career. And when challenged, broke down and started. I thought he was going to faint. Part of it was rage and part of it was fear. So it's probably more than you ever want to know about J. Douglas Edwards.
Okay.
But on stage, he was fantastic. And in the front of this book, I wrote the story. The first sales contest that I ever won, it was Holiday Magic Sales Contest. What I won was a trip to Miami to see a Doug Edwards presentation, sit on the front row, and have dinner with him, have a private dinner. And I tell the story in the book. When we walked in the dining room, the room quieted down. Of course, everybody in the dining room was there because of the meeting, as American Sales Masters. And it quieted down. Somebody said, "There's J. Douglas Edwards." I could hear the stage whisper. And almost everyone in the room stood up and started clapping. And I thought, whoa, that's something. So we sat down. The waiter came over and said, "How may I help you?" He gave us the menus, and Doug handed the menus back and gave him $100 bill, which today would be 1,000 or roughly. Gave him $100 bill and said, "All we're going to need is water. This young man tells me he wants to learn how to be a salesman, and I'm going to teach him." And we talked over the table until the vacuum cleaner was running. Those days, I used to hear the vacuum cleaner frequently in a bar or a restaurant, whatever.
Yeah.
Even the janitor wants out of here. So that was how, and Jimmy Rucker, the greatest salesman I ever worked with, James H. Rucker Jr., my running buddy. He was my buddy in high school. How was I to know he was a great salesman? He didn't know.
He's still around.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And talk to him or email him almost every day. He says, much to my chagrin, because I was sort of we were the same age, but I was sort of the senior partner. He says that everything he ever needed to know about selling, he learned in short order from J. Douglas Edwards. So great guy, great on stage, impressive, taught me a lot, created Jimmy Rucker's career, if you would discount me, who also helped Jimmy. And in spite of all that, he was a jackass.
Okay, fair enough. And how about I'm going to leave Dr. Hill to last on my questions before we pass over to Ron. So let's talk about Earl Nightingale a little bit. Love the voice, the greatest voice I've ever heard.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you a voice story. I'm at 333 North Michigan Avenue, where their office was in Chicago when I was dealing with them. And we were Nightingale Conant's biggest customer. Holiday Magic. Bill Patrick, William Penpatrick said to me, "Set up a training program." I said, "Okay." And I went down to my office. I thought, I wonder what a training program is. So I had heard Earl Nightingale on the radio, his little 5-minute segment, "Our Changing World," it was called. I'd heard the voice and I knew he was a philosopher. And I thought, I wonder if he does anything out here. And then I remembered that the day I joined Holiday Magic, my sponsor, Bill Dempsey, gave me a record, The Strangest Secret. He gave me two things, The Strangest Secret and Think and Grow Rich. He said, "You're young, inexperienced, you're going to need these." And he gave them to me. So I got out the record and listened to it again and again. And then I called, on it was their phone number or address or whatever. I found them, called them, and I said, "What have you got that would be, I'm running this company, Holiday Magic." And whoever I was talking to, either Ron or Les Davis, their VPs of sales, said, "You're calling me and we've been plotting and scheming how to get in contact with you." And I said, "Well, you've accomplished it." So we bought The Strangest Secret customized for Holiday Magic. holiday magic, whatever, how we phrased it. And then the Lead the Field series. It was Lead the Field with Holiday Magic, and later Lead the Field with our motor oil additive company, Stay Power, and Lead the Field with Bob Cummings Vitamins and so on. And Earl would do the lead in to them, and then the rest of the series stayed the same. So all of a sudden, we had a training program that Ben Gay had developed by calling Earl Nightingale and asking. So anyway, what I started to say about voice, one day I'm at 333 North Michigan Avenue and talking with Earl, and he says, let's go to lunch. And I said, okay. And they were right on the river, and it was a cold day. And between his office and where we were going to the restaurant went over a little bridge which went over the river. And he said, we'll just walk over. Well, I was in a California light or midweight suit. I thought I was going to die before I got to the other side of the bridge. In fact, I remember thinking, because it was, Michigan, Lake Michigan blew right into that river thing. I remember thinking, oh, when I've seen in the movies, they get so cold, they want to lie down and go to sleep. I now understand that. I wanted to lie down on the bridge in a fetal position and just let it go. It was so cold. But we finally made it to the restaurant, walked in, and Earl, being a gentleman, sort of pushed me forward. So now I'm walking towards a table, and the gentleman stands up, obviously in anticipation of us arriving. And I said, hi, I'm Ben Gay. And he said, I can't do the voice. But he said, yes, I'm Paul Harvey. And as soon as I heard the voice, I went, my God, another one I know from the radio. So I sit down at the table, and I'm 25. I was conceived on, very few people know this, their date, conception date, December 7th, 1941. My father was home on leave, got called back because of the war had started, and they decided to have one last encounter because we'll never see each other again, and I'll be, killed in the war. I'm not sure how he was going to do that as a photographer in Rochester, New York, but it's possible, I guess. And so that's when I was conceived. On that day, Earl was on the USS Arizona when it was blown out from under him.
Yep.
And had he not been in the superstructure doing something, he was one of the few Marines on board. When the Arizona listed, as we say in the Coast Guard, when it listed, he was able to drop from his position right in the water. Had it stayed upright to get out of his position, he had to jump to the deck, and that would have been the end of Earl Nightingale. So anyway, young Ben Gay is now sitting between two of the greatest voices in the world, Earl Nightingale and Paul Harvey. And occasionally Earl would punch me and say, come on, join in. I go in my Minnie Mouse voice, no, that's okay. I'll just listen. It was fascinating, but it was among the longest lunches I've ever been to. I was thinking, Lord, get me out of here before I have to speak and there's no way out of it. So that's you want a quick, funny Earl Nightingale story?
Sure.
Like he was the voice of Holiday Magic in all of our companies, he was also the voice of other companies, included Beltone hearing aids. And and he was a very sophisticated, almost stuck-up gentleman. I mean that in the kindest sense. He was Earl Nightingale, and he knew he was Earl Nightingale, if that means it. So somebody, it might have been Lloyd, he said my manager, and Lloyd Conant started. I was just a distributor selling his records, so it might have been Lloyd, I don't know. Brought him a script that Beltone wanted done for their holiday message to all of their Beltone distributors. And Earl looked through it and said, I'm not reading this. And I'm making up words, but the gist of it was, hi, this is Earl Nightingale, and it's my pleasure to tell you that Beltone loves you, and may the snow of the fairies fall on your head, and, one of those icky, gooey, Christmassy things. And Earl says, I'm not reading this. And someone, the manager, said to him, we need the money, we need the account, you're going to read it. And so Earl said, all right, well, he was you could hand him the phone book and he could make it sound interesting. He didn't need any rehearsal. As soon as he had the paper in his hand, he could do a cold read, which creates a bad engineer, because the bad engineer who had worked with him for quite some time and moved to Arizona with him when he retired, so I guess they spent 40, 50 years together in recording and radio booths, had gotten to the point where he really didn't listen anymore. Earl didn't make mistakes. If he made one that was really bad, he caught it, said start over or whatever, but the engineer told me that rarely happened. So mainly, the engineer went to his happy place until he saw Earl stand up. That meant stop recording, send it to be pressed. So he was forced to read the bell-tone hearing aid happy dappy Christmas message. And it went to, you remember the Flexi records?
Mm-hmm.
They were made by Evertone. You get them out of a magazine.
Yeah.
They were square, but they had a round record. Well, they were trying to talk me into putting several of the Holiday Magic increments in the recruiting system on Flexi records where they'd be inexpensive, and distributors who wouldn't or couldn't learn the scripts could hand out records and they'd listen to them. I said, I don't even know what a Flexi record is. So I'm in Chicago. And I said, what do they sound like? They said they sound like regular records. And one of them, Ron or Les Davis, one of them got up, went outside the office and picked up the bell-tone hearing Christmas message. They were stamped, labeled, ready to go. They were sitting in the lobby of their office. And he got one out of the pile, brought it in, folded it back, because it was sort of, like a magazine. You fold it back, put it down on the record player, and on comes that familiar voice. Hello, this is Earl Nightingale with bell-tone hearing aids. And in this joyous time of year, icky gooey, icky gooey, icky gooey. And so, but I'm thinking, well, the recording quality is good. And he said, and so, once again, this is Earl Nightingale with bell-tone hearing aids, wishing you and your family the most wonderful of Christmases. Slight pause. Jesus Christ, what a crock of shit. May I repeat, on 10,000 records. And Ron Davis jumped up and threw his body over the record player like that would solve the problem. And I said, the problem, may I remind you, gentlemen, is out in the lobby. While we're talking, the post.
Oh man, that's funny.
Oh my gosh!
So we're laughing about it when they edited out what the editor should have edited. The engineer should have edited out to start with and repressed them all, and I think the recordings got to the distributors right a little after Christmas, but the heart was still in it.
That's funny.
So one night at dinner, we're laughing and talking, and Earl said, thank God they got all of those records before they went out. And he said, we destroyed them here. And I said, well, they got almost all of the records. And he said, what? And I said, well, there was that one they were playing in the meeting room for me, and that's at home in San Rafael, California. So I want you to be very nice to me, Earl, because we too have a duplication studio. This record can come back to life. And gentlemen, I swear to you, it's here somewhere. Buried in hundreds of thousands of books and so
God,
somewhere.
that would be great to hear.
Yeah, and I keep thinking I'm going to be muddling around one day, and there it's going to be. I know what it looks like. It's white with gold trim, Earl Nightingale, bell-tone hearing aids, the holiday message, or something like that.
That is so funny.
That's hilarious.
When I find it, I'm going to be a wealthy man. Another quick one that was funny. Those of us of a certain age, and you two aren't one of us, remember Sky King. You're probably the age where you knew Sky King on television, the television.
I've heard the radio replays, though. I've heard that.
Yeah, he flew around in an airplane with his niece Penny, and they solve problems, sort of a light-hearted paladin, have gun will travel, except he was just happy-dappy and stumbled into things, and they solved problems. On the radio, Sky King was Earl Nightingale, and for the voice. So one day, the manager comes in, and they said they want you as Sky King to go out and pose by the airplane and so on. He said, I'm not going to do that. It's when I was Earl was a pretty good sized guy, tall. He said they've measured, I gave him your measurements and the suit is ready. Well, the suit was sort of like a Roy Rogers suit because Sky King was a flying cowboy. And Earl says, I'm not going to do it. So they had the talk again that frequently you had to have with Earl. We need the money. You're going to do it. Fast forward a week. They go out to the airport ahead of the event. Earl gets in the plane dressed like Sky King. He didn't fly it anywhere, but when the little kiddies were all let in, he gets out of the airplane. He said that was a struggle, but he got out of it, stood out on the wing, waved to the adoring little children, not knowing behind him on his heels, he had hooked his, what do you call them, the spurs, had hooked his spurs together. So as he went down to get off the wing of the Cessna, whatever it was, his feet were tied together basically, and he fell off the wing and onto his head, and his hat was crushed and so on. He wasn't hurt, although he used to laugh and say that scar on his head was from that fall. The scar on his head was from a brain tumor that he had removed at about that time. But Sky King, also known as Earl Nightingale, was in a heap on the runway in front of 200 adoring children. So I used to tell Earl, I'm going to follow you around for the rest of my life and wait for the next Sky King moment, the next Bell-tone hearing aid moment, because you are a funny guy. We're on the boat one day, we had several, but on the cabin cruiser on San Francisco Bay. Dr. Hill is behind me in a folding chair, which wasn't smart, but I'm in the Coast Guard, so Coast Guard Reserve, and was stationed at that time on San Francisco Bay. So this is home territory for me. I'm fine. It's been long, mature. Earl is standing up on the bow with his ever-present double bourbon, looking out at the sky, and we hit. I was in the Coast Guard, and I don't know what you call it. A swell goes up. This was a concave, like a trough. Wow. Probably something to do with a freighter had gone by or something, and I didn't see it, or wasn't paying attention. So we're going along, and all of a sudden, there's no water under us, and we're headed down into this trough. And then we come up the other side like a surfer in a 45-foot boat, I'm guessing it was, and we land, on the water. And so it was just an uncomfortable, awkward moment. I was standing behind the wheel. I went down on one knee. More importantly, I thought, oh, Dr. Hill, and I look around, and his chair was askew, but he hadn't fallen out of it. I thought, that's good. So then I look up to make sure Earl's okay. There's no Earl. He's gone. He had fallen off the front off the bow of the boat. But as he went off, his knee, it wasn't anything that he did, his knee wrapped around one of the stanchions, that held up the railing. So he was there. He was just out of sight, hanging upside down with his head in San Francisco Bay. I stop the engines, run up, we pull him up, and up he comes with his glass still in his hand. The ice was gone, but there was still enough brown in it to know it was bourbon or something. He hadn't dumped it.
Wow.
And he got up and looked around, and I said, Earl, I am so, so sorry. My God. He said, let me tell you something. If the Japanese couldn't get me at Pearl Harbor, Ben Gay can get me in San Francisco Bay.
My God. Wow. Oh, man. It's incredible. And so let me ask you this, Ben. Let's talk a little bit about Zig.
Well, I met Zig September 15th, 1965, Wednesday at noon. Why was that memorable? because I answered a little ad in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, said, if you know anything about marketing plans and want to make more money, call this number. So I went in the phone booth, called, began interviewing Bill Dempsey to see if he was worthy of hiring me. And about 5 minutes into the conversation, he said, Mr. Gay, I'm not the man standing in a phone booth answering want ads. Where are you? And I told him. He said, oh, you're only about 2 blocks from where I am, 1447 West Peachtree Street, Suite 300. Be standing in front of my desk in 10 minutes or never dial this number again. He slammed down the phone. Your younger viewers don't understand slamming down the phone because they wouldn't do that with their cell phones. But in the old days, you slam down the phone if you were mad. So Jimmy Rucker and Rucker said, where are we going? I said, we're going to be rich. I didn't know what it was, but I said, we're going to be rich. And we got there with about a minute to spare. I went skidding in the office. And I said to the receptionist, hi, my name is Ben Gay. And she said, we've been waiting for you. And from behind me, a guy sitting in the lobby said, Ben Gay. And, I've heard a few Ben Gay jokes in my life, so that wasn't the first time for me. I turned around and said, yes, I'm Ben Gay, put out my hand. What's your name? He said, Zig Ziglar. I said, with a name like Zig Ziglar, you're laughing at Ben Gay? You got to be kidding me. Well, he had answered the same ad. Zig, repeat, was 18 years older and had done a lot of speaking, church speaking, so on, but he'd never had a big hit. This was about to be his first big Grand Slam home run. And so we went in, listened to Bill Dempsey do the thing. We all joined, $91.41 to get a little 1-pack box of cosmetics, and off we went. Zig took off faster than I did, or we did, Jimmy and I, because he was more experienced and was clever enough to learn the scripts they gave us. I thought that was beneath my dignity. So for the first 6 months, we didn't make anything. The last 6 months, there was a year-long contest. And in that year-long contest, now that we were up and running, I'm fond of saying but Jimmy Rucker and I beat Zig and his partner, Mel Lanius, who was a great salesman, by the way. Zig was the front man in the act. Mel Lanius was when he sits down in front of you, you might as well get out your checkbook. It's over. And so we went through a year-long contest, and I knew we were doing well because I would look at my own checkbook, but I didn't know where we were in the standings. My father raised me to do the best you can every day, and if that makes you the winner, fine. If not, screw it. And so at the end of the contest, I got a call from California. We had won by not a whole lot, just a few $1,000s in gross volume. It turned out Zig had been keeping track, knew he was near the top. I don't know if they told him where we were, but he was having a celebratory victory party that night in Columbia, South Carolina. Jimmy Rucker and I were doing an opportunity meeting. And the money that we sold, the sales we sold in that opportunity meeting were the difference basically between us and Zig and Mel.
Wow.
So
Wow.
never celebrate too soon might be the message there.
Ooh, yeah.
But Zig and I became very good friends. I admired him. He being the way I started getting reasonably good at speaking was I saw how good he was. I was class clown, voted wittiest and so on, but that gives you about 5 minutes of material. Zig had hours of material, and I quickly figured out I probably ought to get good at this. And the way I started getting good was I said to Zig, you carry around that big pump. He used to do biscuits, fleas, and pump handles. Those 3 separate stories. Yep. And the pump handle was one of those old farm pumps, you see. And it was later he got an aluminum one that was all shiny and fancy looking and easier to carry. But when I met him, it was an honest to God pump off of somebody's farm. And it was an attention getter when you went to pick it up. And I saw him struggling coming into the hotel one night with his pump. And I thought, if he's the star of the show, it's like Elvis shouldn't be seen unpacking the instrument van. Even if he does, you shouldn't see it.
Yeah.
So I said, Zig, I got an idea. Whenever we're in the same area, I'll carry your pump. And here's what I want in return. I want to have dinner and or lunch before or after the meeting. I want to sit on the front row and I want to study you. You know, is that okay? It's not going to cost you any money and I'll carry the pump. He said, you're on. So probably the first 50 times I really sat in an audience and studied the star, it was Zig, and my price was carrying that pump around.
So you got a workout and an education
Yep.
at the same time. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. That's a smart salesman right there. So let me ask you.
He was a great guy, but let me clear. Zig wasn't technically a great salesman. You bought from Zig because you love Zig, but it wasn't because he gave you an alternate choice close and, you know, a double down, wrap around, so and so. You just loved
He was a great storyteller.
Yeah, absolutely the best. And and I've told many in my public speaking classes, I tell people, you're not going to be Zig Ziglar. He came out of his mother's womb laughing, giggling, and telling stories. And he did it till the day he died. He was the best at that. And so wonderful, wonderful gentleman. I got nothing but fond memories of him.
My only time I ever met him, I just moved to Dallas. This was 1993 or 4. And I was working out at a little private gym. And somebody had told me that Zig used to bring the redhead, his wife, right? They always called the redhead, to the salon next door. So it was a Saturday morning. And, I'm all sweaty. I'm lifting weights and everything. And all of a sudden, I see Zig Ziglar get out of the car, walk to the other side, open the door, take his wife by the elbow, walk her into the salon. And then he went back to the car and he disappeared, probably, went for a cup of coffee or something when she was getting her hair done. A couple hours later, I'm waiting. I'm like, it's Zig Ziglar. I mean, like, I'll wait and, I'll stand 3 feet
you
from
try
him.
not to look creepy, but
Exactly.
you're waiting.
Exactly. I'm like, that's Zig Ziglar. Like, I'm not missing this opportunity. I'm not even going to go home. So he comes back, probably about an hour and a half later. And he comes back and it's like, I finished my workout at that point. I only had one shirt with me. And ever since that, by the way, guys, I've always had an extra shirt in the car just in case.
Yep.
So here comes Zig back. And I was like, Mr. Ziglar, I said, I just want to say hello to you. I'm a big fan and heard you speak many times. And we spent about 20 minutes just standing in the parking lot chatting to the point where I could tell his wife was starting to get a little aggravated, like, hey, it's time to go home. So I was like, I'll let you go. And unfortunately,
she was used to it, by the way.
we didn't have, we did have cell phones in those days, but you couldn't take a picture. So unfortunately, I don't have the photographic evidence, but you're absolutely right. He was such a gentleman, such a good man. Good man. So let me ask you about William Penpatrick before we get to Dr. Hill.
Bill Patrick was the head of the owner of the company that I joined. It started in 1964. I joined in 1965. And I met him earlier in my career than I should have. In other words, I hadn't earned the right to be hanging out with the chairman of the board yet. But he was going to go on a 25 cities in 25 days speaking tour. And he wanted somebody to introduce him and at each of those things. And the president of the company at the time, Fred Pape, Bill said, who do we have that would be good at doing that? He said, well, we got this kid in Atlanta, Ben Gay, and he would, I'm sure, do it with us or for you. Fred wasn't on the trip. They had a Cessna 310. I'm not a big airplane guy, although I ran an airport and we had a mini Air Force with over 40 airplanes in it. But Cessna 310, I think twin engine, whatever. Art Stagg, the corporate pilot, who became a dear friend of mine, Bill Patrick, and me did 25 cities in 25 days, which today with a corporate jet would be nothing. I've done 33 cities in 11 days. But in wintertime in a Cessna, that's a bit of a challenge. And it gives you lots of time in the air just talking because you're not zipping around all that fast. So I got to spend 25 days with Bill Patrick up close and personal. And somewhere along in the middle of that, we became friends. And he didn't move anything out of the way to help me, but when I won the mystery prize in the year-long sales contest, the mystery prize being the presidency of the company, uh, uh, he didn't do anything to help me. He didn't jiggle any numbers, but he told me, "I'm very happy you won." And I said, "Why is it a mystery prize? Why'd you make it a mystery prize?" He said, "In case whoever won it was somebody I didn't like, then I would have changed the prize." So I won the presidency of the company. Zig got a Rolls Royce. A guy named Jim Hearn got a Lincoln, I think, and then Bill Dempsey, my sponsor, won a Thunderbird. And on bad days, when I'd be talking to Zig wherever he was, or if he was in the office, I would say, "Zig, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. You bring me the keys to the Rolls Royce, and I will give you the keys to the front door of the Holiday Magic office." And Zig would say, "Oh, no, you won that fair and square." He knew that I had stepped into a bear trap, and it wasn't exact. I had only seen the executives of the company walking into rooms with spotlights on them and the crowds cheering. I didn't realize that meanwhile back at the office, they actually had jobs and decisions to make. So it wasn't all glamour. But Bill, other than my father was my first and most important mentor, and tied for second would be William Penpatrick. And then, unfortunately, he had some personal financial problems, and he got greedy, I guess, or desperate or whatever. And he came in my office one day and he said, "Ben, we need to make more money." Well, by that time, we were taking in $1 million a day. Adjusted for inflation, that's $3.5 billion. And I said, "Bill, I don't know how to make any more than this without lying, cheating, stealing." You're building, I don't mean we were done, but there's a natural momentum. And he was talking about like double the momentum. I said, "I don't know how to do that without lying, cheating, and stealing." And the reason we were at times had run out from under our financial hat was we bought him a 3,500 acre ranch up in Clear Lake, California, next door to Bill Bailey's ranch. He used to be with Holiday Magic and started his own company, Best Line, after they had a breakup. And we're getting close to where I met Jim Rohn. He was head of Best Line. I was head of Holiday Magic. So we were sort of friendly rivals. A lot of never really considered it that way. They were in a different type of business. Other than, like us, the way you got into Holiday Magic, I would put one on my desk, but we all carried little pocket hand mirrors about the size of a deck of playing cards in our pocket. And people say, "I don't know if I'm qualified to join the business." And we take out the mirror, put it under their nose, and if we got vapor, you're in.
So that's where that came. I know that trick. That's where that came from, you guys.
Well, I don't know where it came from, but it's where I learned it or picked it up or something. But the ranch and the huge house we built up there, which is now Cy World's headquarters, the Wilhites were Holiday Magic distributors, and the 110-foot yacht in Sausalito, the Principia, tied up next door in the next slip to the Electra, which was almost a twin yacht owned by Best Line. So while competing with Bill Bailey, who has the biggest yacht, who has the biggest ranch, who has the biggest house, Ben Gay's back at the ranch churning out the money to make all this possible. So he said to me, I didn't really take it seriously. I thought he was just mad. "Well, if you won't lie, cheat, and steal, I'll find somebody who will." And fast forward a few weeks, I guess, I look out my front door at my home, and here comes Abe Solomon, who owned a local bank, but the biggest local bank. I didn't know he knew where I lived. We weren't social friends, but I knew who he was. I think he was on the board of one of our companies, would sit in as a banker occasionally. I opened the door and I said, "Hey, Abe, what are you doing here?" He said, "I need to talk to you." And he came in. I said, "What's up?" He said, you and Bill are sort of at odds. I said, and I'd almost forgotten the conversation. And I said, I don't, at odds what? He said, well, you said you were making all the money that you could make without lying, cheating, and stealing. And I said, that's true, although I'm trying even harder now. And he said, well, Bill has decided that if you won't lie, cheat, and steal, he'll get somebody who will. And shortly thereafter, Bill and I parted ways, and he brought in a guy who would lie, cheat, and steal, Roland Nocera. I'm not up for libel because he's dead. But he brought in Roland Nocera from Chicago, who was sort of a wannabe mafia type guy. And they lied, cheat, and stole for the next couple of years. And the company went bankrupt just as Bill flew into a hillside in our P-51 and killed himself. Now, I don't mean killed himself like suicide. Yeah. He was being Bill. I had been up to the ranch with him numerous times to see where my money was going. And on one of them, he came down and got me at our airport in the P-51. We went up to the ranch. He flew upside down at treetop level. I could see pine cones out the canopy. And the P-51 was probably the fastest prop plane ever made. Legendary airplane. And we landed and hung around, participated in the construction of the house. And when the weekend was over, he said, all right, I'll fly you back down. And I said, no, Bill, I called Art Stagg. He's coming to pick me up. He said, we've got 3 airplanes here. I'll take you back. And I said, no, I've ridden with you in an airplane with you as the pilot for the last time. You continue flying upside down through these mountains at 450 miles an hour, you and I up here. And I've got a young son and a wife, and I can't do it. So I love you, but our days, and we used to get in the Stearman and fly aerobatics out over the ocean and over our houses. We flew under the Golden Gate Bridge, that's sort of frowned on, which caused the Stearman to be put in the hangar with blankets over it for about a month to make sure that no one had gotten the tag number off of it or the tail number. So I was guilty too. I climbed out on the wing. We were out over Peacock Country Club, and I climbed out on the wing of the Stearman one day, and I said, I'm going to jump. You know, you're sitting on a big parachute. And it didn't dawn on me, I hadn't been trained really. There was a ring. I assume you pulled that. Stearman wasn't that high in the air, 3,000 feet, although if your parachute doesn't open, 3,000 feet's about enough. And I walked down the wing a couple of steps. The pilot sits in the back cockpit. I was in the front, and I yelled at Bill, will these chutes work? It's a World War II training plane. He says, I don't know. They came with the plane. So I turned around, climbed back into my cockpit, and didn't jump. Or else 2 of us would have had aviation accidents, I guess. I showed when you're young and bulletproof.
Yeah.
You know, today I wouldn't get in the Stearman.
Yeah.
Considering jumping would not be one of my options. And it was my fault we flew under the Golden Gate Bridge, because as we approached coming in, I pointed down at the bridge, you know, to Bill, and he goes, okay. And zoom, we went under it.
That must have been incredible.
So anyway, great guy, got greedy and desperate towards the end, died, would have gone to prison if he'd lived long enough. His successors did, Bill Dempsey and Roland Nocera, did for a brief period of time, one of those things where you do weekends and promise not to do bad things during the week. And then he was closer to broke than we realized. I talked to one of his daughters, his only daughter, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I've stayed in touch, you know, with the various members of the family. His wife was killed in a car crash, Marie Patrick. But I talked to the daughter, and we were talking about those days. Bill died. Fast forward a little bit, house was repossessed, one of the biggest, finest homes in Marin County. I've seen it in the last 4 or 5 months, worth millions of dollars today, probably worth a couple million when he bought it. Had all that going for him, 40 some odd airplanes, 5 companies that were churning out money like you wouldn't believe. And he dies, and the daughter, I'll leave out of the story by name, is living with relatives in North Carolina, back close to Roper, North Carolina, where Bill came from, penniless.
Wow. Sad. Sad.
So, the old saying that I think Bill was probably the first one who told me when we were going through some rough time, he said, "And this too shall pass." Well, I've lived long enough now to know that's good and bad.
Mhm.
You can have 40 airplanes and 42 million and a huge house and so on. And your daughter, not 5 generations away, your daughter can wind up penniless.
Sad. Sad. Lot of good and bad what not to do with money.
Yep.
And that story.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about somebody who had another major influence on you. I mean, what an opportunity to be 27 and be mentored by Dr. Napoleon Hill himself. I mean, that's got to be, wow. I don't even know what to say to that besides wow. And then I'll turn it to you and you can tell us more.
Well, I was 25, had just been president of the company for not very long. We used to have famous people wandering up and down the halls on a regular basis. Ronald Reagan was there. Richard Nixon was there because Bill ran for governor of California and had money. So people were always hanging around. And then we had our own superstars, the Napoleon Hills of the world and so on. That actually started that day. But Zig and Ogmandino and so on, people say, "How'd you meet all these people?" And I said, "Well, usually I got up out of my chair and was heading to the bathroom, and I bumped into him in the hallway." It wasn't some lightning bolt rainbow situation. I had to go to the bathroom. So Dr. Hill was in the office. I wasn't aware of it, to present Bill with an award and the first signed copy of a book he'd written. I forget which one it was, but in the book, he said that William Penn-Patrick was one of the 5 greatest living Americans, or something like that. One of those type of puff awards. And later that day, as I signed the check to him, and Ron, this might surprise you that I'll tell other people now, because I told you in private a long time ago, and I said I've never said this, but enough time has passed. Bill accepted the award, and the next day I signed a check to Dr. Hill for $50,000, which is how you get to be one of the 5 greatest people in America, I discovered. If I'd had 50,000 for a vanity project, I could have been the 6th greatest. But anyway, that's the reason he was in the building, to present a plaque, a signed book, and pick up his check, I guess. And on the way back, my office was up front, and Bill's was on the back. On the way back, walking towards the front door, Bill had an idea, and he said to Dr. Hill, "I've got this young guy, he's president of the company, doing a great job," is the way I heard the story, but doing a great job, but he's young and inexperienced, and I'll bet you there are days where he's afraid to come down the hall and tell me that he's in over his head or doesn't know what to do about this and so on. I would like for you to be, and we use mentor now on a regular basis. I'm not sure that was the word, but be his friend. I was sort of like Rodney Dangerfield, the old comedian. He used to say that the family tied a pork chop around his neck so the dog would play with him. Bill tied a $50,000 check around my neck so Dr. Hill would play with me and be my friend. And so he did. I'm sitting in the office, and most people had to go through Marty Conley, my assistant secretary boss. And Bill was always in the door open. He didn't wait for a response. It was just bam, bam. And all of a sudden he's standing there. I said, "Hey, Bill, how are you?" And there's this little old man standing next to him and on a cane. And so being a Southerner, I jumped up to run around to meet his uncle or whoever it was. And praying, he used to bring old friends by and then say, "Ben, build a company around him." Stay Power Motor Oil Additives was based around a guy who had a little concoction he'd made in his garage. But his name was Terry McVeigh, I think, something like that. But so Bill Patrick said, build a company around him. And so we set up Stay Power, same marketing plan, same everything, just a different product. And it was quite successful. Then Bob Cummings Vitamins and so on. As I'm rounding the table, I'm thinking, oh God, multi-level marketing wheelchairs. That's what I'm going to have to do next. And so I stuck out my hand. I said, "Hi, I'm Ben Gay." And Bill Patrick said, "Ben, that's Dr. Napoleon Hill." Well, I'd never seen him at that age and so on. You remember the pictures in his books? I don't think I have one handy, but with a tall collar,
Yeah.
looking very uncomfortable. He said he hated those shirts. That's who I thought Dr. Napoleon Hill was, and didn't realize time had marched on and fashions had changed. So he said, "Ben, I've hired Dr. Hill to work with you. And the deal is you can tell him anything you want to tell him, anything. It'll never get to me. And if he can be of help to you, he will. And he's at your beck and call by phone." He was back in Columbia, South Carolina. Fly him out here. He loved the Learjet. So Dr. Hill would make up excuses to come out. He just loved being picked up in the Learjet and flown across the country. And he'll be at your beck and call, and tell him anything and get the answers, and then whatever. I've hired a grandfather for you. And so we started working together, but I didn't trust the concept. Bill could be quite devious. So believing there might be a little bit of a spy system built into this relationship, I tested him. And the way I tested him was, Ron, a story I'm sure you're familiar with, because you know as much or more about the business in those days than I do. Bill Bailey, who later was Best Line, and Jim Rohn. I thought Jim Rohn's mentor until I started hearing Earl Show. But Bill Bailey was a big factor in Jim Rohn's life.
Oh, sure.
And Bobby DePew and Richard Michaels, the three of them walked into Bill's office one day and announced that since they were doing the hard work, the heavy lifting, they each wanted 25% of the company, and Bill Patrick could keep 25% of the company. And long story, somewhat shorter, Bill said, "Well, let me think about it. Come up to the house tonight for dinner." So they left, probably high-fiving each other, or whatever you did in those days, that Bill was going to turn over 75% of the company. They go up to the house, the big house I was talking about a moment ago that got repoed, foreclosed on. And the big double doors open, and now you're standing up on about a 3-step riser looking down on the living room where a dining room table had been set up, and there sits Bill at the far end of the dining room table. All the seats filled, and probably 40, 50 people, all the employees of Holiday Magic standing around. And Bill Patrick said, "Gentlemen, welcome to the Last Supper." And there was cars waiting outside. They all went to the airport. One went to Canada. I think that was Bobby DePew. One went to Mexico, and one was sent on a worldwide tour to see if the opportunities to open Holiday Magic existed elsewhere. But they went from that room to the airport. Anything they needed was shipped to them later. It was that quick a break. Well, Bill Patrick hated that so much, felt so betrayed, although he and Bill Bailey became friends later again, that telling the story, he would turn red in the face and the neck muscles, would tighten up. So I had an idea. I wrote a letter to Bill Patrick and I said, "Dear Bill," I'm paraphrasing, but the gist of it was, "Dear Bill, I appreciate the opportunity to work with Dr. Hill. But I'm a little uncomfortable with this I can tell him anything thing. So he's going to probably come to you and tell you that I am plotting to take over the company because I want to test the system." And blah, blah, blah. Had it sealed up in the art department with a wax seal, gave it to Marion McGinnis, his secretary, and I said, "Put that in your desk drawer. And if Dr. Hill ever comes in here and you hear Bill explode, and my name comes up, handing this letter," because it will show, I didn't tell her what was in it, but whatever. And so then within a day or two, I told Dr. Hill that a group of us who were really making the money in the company, while Bill was getting all the credit, we have decided to demand 75%. I laid out the exact same scenario that Bill Bailey and the gang had put on Bill Patrick. We've decided to take 75% of the company and give him 25, and he can go up to the ranch and retire if he wants, whatever he wants to do, float around the world on the Principia. And laid it all out for him. Dr. Hill listened for a minute and he said, "Don't do it." And then went on a bit. But Dr. Hill was very succinct. He wrote The Law of Success, which looks like the New York phone book, but in person, 2 or 3 words would usually do it. Focus, Ben. Take action, Ben. That type of thing. He said, "Don't do it." And I said, "Well, I think this would be good. Don't do it." So we ended the thing, and it might have come up at the house that night or dinner or something again. But every time it did, if it did, it was "don't do it." So now I'm waiting for the explosion. I left the company. Company ran on another 2 years when it finally bankrupted, and they hauled away the furniture to the best of my, and Bill Patrick and I had become friends again. We were having secret lunches and stuff. To the best of my knowledge, in Mary McGinnis's top drawer, there sat the letter with a wax seal on it.
Wow.
Dr. Hill never broke the silence. The letter was never necessary. He was a true man, an old-fashioned Southern gentleman, and taught me a whole lot. And people have heard that we have a company called The Last Protégé. It's a mentoring company, and I am, by that title, The Last Protégé. And my partner in that, Mark Harris, asked me one day, "Well, did he give you assignments?" Like Dr. Hill would come in and give me reams of paper to fill out, and I'd have to go fill them out. And I said, "No, it wasn't that kind of relationship at all. He was my friend, my older friend, my wise advisor." And that was it. And most of what I learned was over lunch. After he would sit in a meeting for hours and never say a word. He always had the legal pad he made me carry around, and still do. He would be writing on his legal pad. I don't know if he was writing the next book or notes to a friend. I don't know what he was doing, but he wouldn't say a word. He would never criticize me or question me unless asked a direct question by me until the room was clear. And then when the door locked, I can still hear the click. If his head came up, I'd think, "Uh-oh, here it comes." And then he would tell me what he thought about that situation, but only to me. Probably the most trusted person I've ever worked with, including my father, because anything my father knew, he told my mother. Dr. Hill didn't know my mother. So it was even more sacred than that.
If you had to say, of all the things you learned from Dr. Hill, if there was one thing.
I was asked that. Well, I'll give you 3 things, because I was asked that at a seminar not too long ago in Las Vegas. And they said, and I hate questions like that because he taught me 500 things.
I bet.
Yeah. And at the moment, each one was the most important thing because I need to hear it right then.
Right.
But I was asked, "What are the 3 things Dr. Hill taught you?" And I thought, "Tongue, don't fail me now." And I just let go what my subconscious, I heard it when they heard it. And I said, number 1, integrity, absolute integrity in all things. 2, focus. I'm sort of the crow that sees the shiny bracelet and his head spins around and he's gone. I have a tendency to do that. Right now, I'm talking to you guys. I'm intently staring at your faces and or in the camera. Off screen, I'm a news junkie. There's a television on. And a moment ago, I saw in my peripheral vision bulletin. And I wanted to turn my head and see what the bulletin was. But I heard Dr. Hill in my ear saying, "Focus, Benjamin, focus." So I stayed right here. When we get off, I'll find out what the bulletin was. And then action, take action. One time we were planning a whole new product line and we had meetings, and by coincidence, he was in town for several of them. I'm guessing we'd had 5 or 6 weekly meetings on whether to enter, and this is sort of rakish on our parts, a men's cosmetic line. Now, today that doesn't sound quite as daring as it was in 1967, but it was. And so lawyers were there. the production guy, the purchasing guy, the advertising marketing guy, and the chemist, Mort Scott, who created all of our products. 5-6 times, I'm guessing, we met. And one of the meetings turned out to be the last one. Dr. Hill was sitting at his seat at the end of the table, writing on something. And I said, all right, guys, well, we'll meet back here next, Wednesday, Thursday at noon. And they all got up and left. And I clicked on the door, and Dr. Hill's head came up. I thought, oh, this is not good. And he said, what are you going to know next week that you don't know now? And I said, well, I don't know. He said, Ben, you're dithering. You are dithering. Take action. So I buzzed Marty. I said, Marty, regather the team. Everybody came back in. I said, what do you need to know now that you need to launch this thing if I pull the trigger? And every one of them said, nothing. I could have asked that same question 4 meetings before. They said nothing. I said, so if I say go, does everybody know what they're supposed to do? And they said, yeah. I said, go. And 2 months later, High Tides, the men's line, was on the street and a huge success.
Wow.
But so integrity in all things, focus, action. Those are the 3 things that when I think of Dr. Hill really pop up in my head.
And I have written them down because that is sage advice from the best of the best. And, Ben, I know Ron's got a number of questions for you too. Let me just reintroduce Ron. Ron Henley is the curator and founder of the Network Marketing Historical Society based in beautiful Atlanta, Georgia. And
yes, Atlanta.
Ron, I know you're an Atlanta guy, right? You were born in Atlanta?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, he's a heavy Atlanta guy.
Okay. One of my favorite cities. Ron, you're up.
All right. Gosh, I'm just blown away. I was telling John earlier that Napoleon Hill kept wanting you to call him Nappy, and you refused.
It was a running battle for 2.5 years. I said, hi, my name is Ben Gay. Bill said, that's Dr. Napoleon Hill. I said, Dr. Hill, it's a pleasure to meet you. He said, call me Nappy. And I said, no. I'm not going to do that. I'm a Southerner. If somebody's old enough to be your great grandfather, you don't call them. They don't even have a first name.
Sir.
It's sir. Yeah. So he said, no. All my friends call me Nappy, and I said, well, I hope to become your friend, but I'm not going to call you Nappy. And I've told Ron that I would have entire discussions with Dr. Hill. It's like writing a book and there's a word you don't use often and people don't understand it. So you have to write an extra page just to get around using that word. Dr. Hill and I had several conversations that were much longer than they needed to be while I was avoiding Nappy or calling him Dr. Hill, which would always start a battle. But I won. I never called him Nappy. Pardon me, I never even said the word out loud until he was dead.
That's like Neil Armstrong. Every time when he would land on the moon, he would thank some guy, and he would never tell the story until the guy had passed on, and it was his next door neighbor. And Neil, when he was a young boy, had knocked the ball over under their window. And as he leaned down to pick up the ball, he heard the husband and wife in there fighting, and they said, well, you got about as much chance of pulling that off as the kid next door has to going to the moon. Well, Neil Armstrong was the first guy on the moon. So every time he would end his speeches, he would give thanks to this Mr. whatever his name was. And until he died, he didn't tell the story. So it was really interesting about that. But
that's like, Jimmy Durante, the old comedian, ended every show with, good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are. And it was
Calabash.
Mrs. Calabash.
Yep.
She was the one who could look out the window of the speakeasy where he was appearing with Clayton Jackson and Durante. And she could tell by the way a person wore his hat or whatever if he was a cop. If he was a cop, Mrs. Calabash spotted it, shut down the place, the drinks disappeared, and so on. If he wasn't, let him in. And he said if it weren't for Mrs. Calabash, he'd have been in prison. And he said, and you never would have heard of me.
Jeez. Such incredible stuff. I'm just trying to pick up some of the highlights. I loved all the comments you had to say about everybody. The stories of you and Jim Rohn sitting on the tail fins of your boat side by side, having conversations, stuff like that, and him always calling you Benjamin. Never would call you Ben.
I can't do it. I won't attempt to do it because everybody knows what Jim Rohn really sounds like, but we all know that unique way he had of talking. And
he had that baritone voice.
And draw things out. You know, why does somebody do that? I don't know.
I can hear that. I can hear that voice.
That's it. He kept it simple. That's for sure. But let's see. What can we talk about here? Well, let's talk about a few of the people that were legends back in the day that you really had firsthand experience with. And I will leave it up to you as to how much you want to tell, because you and I have had in-depth discussions about these guys.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Glenn W. Turner.
I had a feeling that's
what do you want to
you
share about him?
Glenn was one of the most interesting characters I've ever met. I had the unpleasant duty of having to fire him because he probably was who Bill Patrick was looking for, lie, cheat, and steal, when I knew him. And I know many people have hooked their sleigh onto his star and so on. Bill Patrick was not without his faults. Napoleon Hill was not without his, but Glenn Turner managed to bring down the Attorney General of 2 or 3 states, in particular, I remember North Carolina, on us. And we had to do legal battle because they went into meetings. It's one of the reasons I'm the biggest believer in scripts ever. One, if they're written right, they're effective. 2, they keep you out of jail.
Right.
And so Glenn wouldn't follow the scripts, and he'd get up and go off on whatever. And so it finally got to the point where my legal team, we had a law firm in-house, which shows you that most companies don't need a law firm in-house. But in the multi-level marketing days, back in those early Wild West days, you did. And Dorothy von Beldingen came to me and she said, I don't know this Glenn Turner guy. I've never met him, but he's going to bring this business down. And she started showing me letters and transcripts. They'd gone in and recorded his meetings and so on. He's got to go. So long story. He was a top producer. He wasn't our top producer, but he was making us and himself a lot of money. Finally, a couple of conversations didn't work. A warning letter didn't work. I called him and said, or wrote him or something. I said, I'll be in Atlanta on such a day and need to meet with you. And flew back, went into my old office. Jimmy Rucker still had it. Went to my old office, and Glenn came in. And I do a pretty good Glenn Turner imitation, but it's not politically correct nowadays. Glenn had a cleft palate.
Yes.
But he was a great speaker. And
yeah.
he'd say, well, listen, think, when I get home at night, I take it out and put it on the dresser. And and it would have been better if he then started talking normally, but he didn't because he couldn't. But anyway, I called him in and we met, and friendly little meeting. He probably knew that it wasn't to discuss a promotion, but still, I said, Glenn, we got to let you go. And he said, why? And I said, well, it's the lying, cheating, and stealing, which is sort of funny since that's later how Bill and I parted ways. The lying, cheating, and stealing, we can't do it. We've terminated your distributorship. And whatever the legal thing was, you'll still get your overrides, but you won't be allowed in any meeting and so on. And instead of breaking down and crying or getting mad or screaming all, he said, if I can't lie, cheat, and steal here, I'll start a company where I can. Well, I don't know how long we counted or when we stopped counting, but we'd had 100, I remember the figure, 125 spin-off companies. And who, people who decide they could do it better or whatever, went off, started their own company. Sure. Best Line was one. It succeeded. The other 123 or other 123 didn't make it. Werner Erhard with EST was a spinoff from Leadership Dynamics and Mind Dynamics, the two companies I started, training companies at Holiday Magic. And he tried a Bill Bailey move. Give me half of Leadership Dynamics, Mind Dynamics, or I'm leaving. Bill Patrick got up, put his hand over his shoulder, walked into the door. When they got to the front door, he said, "Oh, Werner, give me your key." And took his key and pushed him out in the street and said, "I wish you the best." And that's how S started, and later the Forum and so on. So when Glenn said he was going to go start a company, I figured, okay, that's 126. You know, he won't make it. And he's been riding a well-honed machine, and that's how he made it in spite of his speech impediments and lack of education and so on. Well, he went off and started Coscott. What is it? Disney's
Coscott Interplanetary.
Yeah, World of Tomorrow or whatever. He named it after that, was based right there. And then later Dare to Be Great, which was sort of like Leadership Dynamics, Mind Dynamics, a combination of how to be effective and successful and so on. And I don't know, didn't have access to his books, although he stole our top executive person, Jan Gillespie, away from us. I didn't even know he knew her. She moved to Orlando and worked for him. So if I'd been bright enough, I could ask her, since she knew our books and his books. But he probably got near us at some point. I don't know. But he built a large, successful company after I tubed him. And when he died, and Ron, you may have been the one who told me he died. I remember we talked within 24 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you probably asked me, how do you feel about that? I said, well, our relationship ended poorly. I had to fire him. But while we were working together and afterwards, he's one of the most fascinating people I ever met. Nothing would keep him down. Absolutely nothing. And most of the time, we weren't hanging out together before. Most of the time I spent with him, it was really interesting. Back in those days, a corporate jet, generally speaking, there may have been a model around or something, couldn't fly all the way across
Love
the
the
country.
story.
Yeah, couldn't fly all the way across the country. So we would land it's not important, in Kansas somewhere. And we would go to the Butler, Grand Island, Nebraska was where it was. We would land at Grand Island, Nebraska, because it was roughly halfway across the country. And the corporate pilots loved to go to Grand Island, Nebraska, because they were treated like royalty. And when we landed and pulled up, out would come, depending on the size of your plane, a golf cart or two filled with gorgeous girls in Dallas cowgirl type outfits. And they would have, for the non-pilots, wine, beer, snacks, and escort us over to Butler Aviation, where we would sit while the planes got refueled. I spent more fun time with Glenn in Grand Island, Nebraska than I ever did before or since. And Rich DeVallis and Jay Van Andel from Amway, frequently, it was sometimes I think our corporate pilots planned it, they would land at Grand Island. So we would all be in the same room laughing and giggling. And I've often said, if the attorney generals wanted to wipe out the MLM industry, which they did from time to time, if they just dropped a bomb on that building, they would have gotten the Amway executives, the Holiday Magic executives, and Glenn Turner's executives. Meanwhile, when we went outside, we had to act like we hated each other, because each company had the thing, you're either in Holiday Magic or you're nothing. Or there's only two types of people in the world, those in Holiday Magic and those outside Holiday Magic. And Coscott taught the same thing, and so did Amway. Behind the scenes, we were all buddies. Jim Rohn and Bill Bailey and I and Bill Patrick spent most time, Bailey and Patrick up at the ranches a lot too, but we spent our time together on the back, on the fantails of either the Electra or the Principia, tied up side by side, because with the bows in, not a casual passerby on the dock would never see us. Of course, most people would know who we were anyway, but we didn't want any distributors to see us hanging out and laughing and giggling. So
Right.
that's Grand
It would
Island.
destroy the illusion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How can you hate somebody that you seem to like? But
Right.
Glenn was just a character, funny, laughed at self-deprecating humor, laughed almost every funny thing I ever heard come out of him. Didn't put down anybody else; it always put down him.
Right. Right. The thing that I always point out to people, and all the studying I've done on over all the years of the entire profession since it started with Carl Renborg and Meitinger and Castleberry, and then for what it is today, everything that happened with Holiday Magic, with Coscott, Dare to Be Great, all these guys, even some with Bestline and a few of the others, wasn't that you guys were doing anything illegal at the time.
No.
People refer to all these lawsuits and everything that happened in the FTC. And I'm like, you don't have to understand. At the time, when you say it was the Wild, Wild West, that's accurate, but it's not, it's not that you guys were just out to rape, pillage, and destroy everything. You were just trying to figure out different ways to do business, to do good business.
When I say the Wild, Wild
as it came
West,
along, you got regulated out of business.
Absolutely.
Because they didn't like it.
They don't like little people having the opportunity to make a lot of money. And if
Right.
I don't know if they're against that or they're against the fact that you've inflated the expectations of someone and who then gets disappointed.
Yeah.
The trick is, and most companies are now doing, is start with so little money that if they don't make it and drop out, nobody cares. They wouldn't
You
come
have to
out.
manage expectations right off the bat.
Yeah. And we did. And when I say the Wild, Wild West of MLM, I don't mean the companies. It wasn't an integrity thing about the company at all. What I was referring to was the type of people who came in to the business. Generally speaking, they were hustlers. I sort of stepped into a swamp the day I joined, or the first time I went to a meeting. Stepped into the swamp, and I thought, wow, I didn't know these type of people existed. I was raised 2 blocks out the front gate of East Lake Country Club and allowed to hang out with my father, whose friends were Ted Turner's father, whoever the chairman of the board of Coca-Cola was at the time, the founders of Home Depot, and so on. Very successful people and classy. And all of a sudden, I'm in with this group of people that were in shiny suits. They're all former Arthur Murray dance instructors, and big Lincolns, and so things that people of class didn't do. My first blow up, I was in California going through some sort of training, and they announced that we were all going into San Francisco and we were going to get diamond pinky rings and alligator shoes. And I said, well, I'm going to be studying the script. So I'll see you when you get back. And Fred Pape, Bill Patrick wasn't part of this, but Fred Pape, who was president before I was, and so on, they said, well, this is a job requirement. We're all going to wear pinky rings and alligator shoes. I said, I'm not. I have some alligator shoes, but they have golf cleats in the bottom of them. I wouldn't wear them anywhere else, nor am I going to wear a pinky ring. I'm not a pimp. I'm a distributor trying to build a business. So it was that element that was there. And then, Ron, as you know, Fred Pape, the former president of the company, when he got word I was going to be the president of the company, I'm not. I guess Bill didn't tell him what the mystery prize was either. Came to the office with a gun and was going to kill me. And Bill Patrick and John Hart wrestled him. I wasn't in the office. I was just told to stay in mine. And I'm sitting there going, what's going on? And I hear boom, boom, as the pistol he brought in went off. And I don't know if he did it deliberately or doing the tussle. It went off into his ceiling, which is no harm, no foul, except our accounting department was on the next floor right over his office. So he very well could have killed some people. Another night, when it appeared I perhaps was a threat to him, I'm working late one night, and the guy who ran all of our physical stuff came into me and he said, Ben, stay here till I tell you to come out. Okay. and the gunshot was the last incident. This is the first incident. So half hour later, he comes in, and his name was Harold Combs. Harold says, "All right, Ben, you can go home." So I cut through the mail room to where his office was, to go out the front door where my car, Bill and I parked with our noses up against the building. And as I walked past Harold Combs' desk, I'd never been a miner or anything, but I'd seen enough movies to know what dynamite looked like. There were 3 sticks of dynamite with wires sticking off of them, taped together, sitting on his desk.
Oh, my
He was 11 o'clock at night. He heard the hood of my car go down. Since he was in charge of my car and knew that I didn't know how to raise a hood, he knew it wasn't me. And just on a hunch, he said, "Freeze," open the gate and all. But the shooting, and one day, and this is after I left Holiday Magic, but they were a little bitter because they were still having to pay me a lot of money to stay home. And I'm sitting up in the office on top of our home, looking out over San Francisco Bay, and I see black smoke coming up from a shopping center that was within eyesight by a yacht harbor. So I got up to see what it was, got out my trusty binoculars. It was my Cadillac sitting in the parking lot with black smoke pouring out of it. My wife had gone to Safeway to pick up something, and somebody threw railroad flares in the front and back seat in an attempt to burn it to the ground. So I even started, this can make me sound a little squirrely, but I started carrying at night, if I had to run to the bank and make a deposit or something, I started carrying a .357 Magnum in a holster, visible, so I didn't need a permit to do it, on the theory that before I get home, I may have a gun battle. Knock at the door one night, look out through the peephole. As I go to open the door, there's 2 or 3 guys standing there, look like they were in hazmat suits, and a sheriff's car in my driveway. I said, "Can I help you?" I knew my wife wasn't out robbing banks or anything, and I wasn't, so I figured, and they said, "Mr. Gay, you need to get your family out of the house. We have reason to believe there's a bomb in here." And they'd gotten a bomb threat from somebody. So I got, Marcia was my first wife.
Yeah, Wild Wild West is a good description.
Yeah.
It was crazy back in those days.
Got them out of the house, and then they said, "Do you want to go on?" I said, "No," because down at the bottom of the driveway, it was a private road, down at the bottom of the driveway, there's somebody down there looking to see if they've run me out of the house. So I'm not going. That would be a bad precedent. So I helped the bomb squad. They didn't give me a suit, but I helped the bomb squad go through all the cubicles and so on. And they brought a dog in. It apparently was just a random call that they had made to somebody. So it was not just happy dappy, put on the cold cream and draw circles. Behind the scenes, it was a little rougher than that.
Oh yeah, the ugly side that most people don't know about. But I guess, gosh, we're what, an hour and 40 minutes into this thing, John?
Yeah. This has just been incredible.
I told you it's going to be different.
I'll tell you what, if I didn't have another guy I'm interviewing at the top of the hour, we'd go another 2 hours. Ben, I just got to say, this is amazing. And what I'd love to do is do another one with you, maybe, a month, 2 months down the road with yourself and also Larry Thompson. And maybe Ron, maybe there's even a third person we can come up with as far as the really the legends of our industry, the reason our industry is here. And I have to thank you, Ben, on behalf of the thousands of people that listen to our show. Without people like you going through, I'm listening to this stuff and I'm like, I've done a lot of crazy stuff. I thought the craziest thing I ever did was painting a warehouse because Health and Welfare Canada was going to close down the company I was with. And they said, "You guys get this painted by Monday, you'll be okay." And I spent the weekend painting a warehouse, but I never had to carry a gun I have, but not for business purposes. But this
not because they were out hunting you.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a lot of things that Jim Rohn never talked about publicly, but in this context of what Ben is talking about, I think it's apropos. When NutriBio got shut down illegally, I might add, Rich Snackenberg, Earl Schoaf wanted completely out of the supplement business. He had it. He saw the hoops you had to jump through. He didn't want anything to do with it. So he started Ovation Cosmetics, which is still in business today, by the way. But Rich Schnackenberg and Jim Rohn decided to open another nutrition company. They had Nutrilite and NutriBio. So they took bio and then light and came up with Bio-Light. That was going to be the name of the new company. And they had, they put all their money into it and had all this product printed and ready to go. Warehouse was full of stuff. And Rich Schnackenberg gets a knock on the door from someone who had identified himself as an official but wouldn't say where he was from, basically telling him that he would not be allowed to open another company because of all the stuff. And when he at first refused to give in, him and Jim both refused to give in, they started getting death threats. They would call the house, strangers would show up at school around Jim's daughters and things like that. It was crazy. So finally they decided to back off and not launch the company. But it's just, you know, I don't tell that story a lot, but considering what Ben just shared, I thought it'd be an interesting wrinkle to add to that thread there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But one thing I do want to talk to you, I don't know how much longer you wanting to go, John, but one story that I always love and it always blows my mind is I want Ben to talk about that day when he was 16 years old. You know what I'm going to ask you about, right?
Yep.
Tell us the story about how you met Earl Schoaf at a NutriBio meeting here in Atlanta.
And probably most of the people we've talked about today, because I've thought about that a lot since you and I discussed it. It was a big regional meeting, not just an opportunity meeting for locals. So my theory is Jim Rohn was probably there. Bill Patrick was probably there.
Bailey.
Earl Schoaf was, because he entered, Bill Bailey, the whole, Bobby Depew, the whole gang was probably in that room. It was the grand ballroom of the Georgian Terrace Hotel on the corner of Ponce de Leon Avenue and Peachtree Street in Atlanta. I wound up living right across the street in the Ponce. So when we were holding meetings there, I could walk to work. I mean, literally elevator down, walk across the street into the ballroom, and there would be a few hundred or a few thousand people. But I'd been in that room earlier at age 16. I'm guessing I didn't log it, but I had to borrow my father's car to go to the meeting. Our next door neighbor, Sonny Snipes, was his name. He was older than I was, but not by much, 4, 5, 6 years, I'm guessing, had joined NutriBio. And he asked me, said, you can get rich with this. And so, you know, when you're 16 and everybody you know is successful, my father and his friends, the thought of joining them was sort of intriguing. And he showed me a few products and so on. I almost didn't care. Rich was what I focused in on. So I borrowed Dad's Buick and drove down to the Georgian Terrace Hotel and walked in, and Sonny said, I'll meet you in the lobby. Well, I walk in. I grew up next door to him. I know what he looks like. He wasn't there. You know, I'm looking behind potted plants. Sonny Snipes, a typical distributor, invited me to an opportunity meeting and didn't come himself. That's a typical distributor. And, you know, and then I didn't make it in business. Well, here's an idea. When you get somebody to go to the meeting, go meet them. Now, probably I was a little early to be successful there, but I point out same marketing plan, virtually, same meeting room, same opportunity. They showed a film that had Bob Cummings in it and so on. And so I'm standing there in my cheap little Robert Hall sport coat, probably had on my reversible vest, red on the one side, black on the other, 142 pounds with a flat top, and probably acne since I was about that age. So I probably didn't look like everybody's dream prospect. I'll spot you that. And Sonny Snipes isn't there. So I'm standing there in the lobby, and then I wander into the back of the meeting room, since I could tell that's the reason people were there. Nobody approached me. Nobody asked me anything. I'm still looking for Sonny Snipes. And a nice gentleman, considerably older than I was, came up and introduced himself, Earl Schoaf. The only person in the room who cared that there was a kid there who was uncomfortable and obviously out of his depth. And he came over and he said, how may I help you? And I said, well, I have a distributor. You probably know him, Sonny Snipes. Earl Schoaf never heard of Sonny Snipes or any other little local distributor in Atlanta. But he said, oh, yes. Something must have held him up. And he said, but you're welcome to stay for the meeting if you have any questions and so on. So I said, fine. I sat down in the back, watched all the stuff, and I really wanted to join. I don't know what I would have done with my box of stuff, but Earl got on to other things and Sonny never showed up. And I went home and the moment passed. 16, roughly 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 27 years later, I was ready. And the scene repeats itself and I join. And then I'm walking into the same, when Jimmy Rucker and I walked into the first meeting at the Georgian Terrace Hotel, I said, Rucker, I've been here. Product was different, but I've been here. And this time we were in, and after a little bit of a slow start, took off like a rocket. I say that when I walked into the phone booth and punched in or dialed in, I guess in those days, the phone number, it was like putting in a rocket launch code, but I didn't know it. And it wasn't a phone. It was not a phone booth. It was a rocket. And
absolutely,
when Dempsey answered the phone, the rocket took off. But yeah, I was there. I could have been president of Neutral Bio at 18 if they'd just signed me
up. Amazing.
Yeah, you and I have talked about that a lot, and it blows my mind to think about. Here you are, this young teenager in the back of the room, and the guys that made this, that created this thing and made it go, are there in the room with you. Zig, you'll meet 7 years later, was probably there.
Probably so.
You know, and you got Bailey and Penpatrick, who would become a major part of your life.
Yep.
Working so closely with Zig later. I mean, that's the kind of moments that you wish somebody had been in there with a dadgum camera, snapping pictures all over the place. I mean, you know.
Or a future machine.
Yeah, I always loved that story.
Yeah,
and I'm glad you
God
shared.
could maybe God could have said in my ear, "Pay attention to these people."
Well,
see that guy over there?
It brings up a great point, and we can stop here. But so your original sponsor quit the business or didn't bother showing up. My original sponsor quit the business. Ron, how about yours?
Yeah, when I got started in May 1st of 1981, I was working at a gas station, and she came over and asked the owner if she could set up over in the corner and sell this stuff. Well, I went over at the lunch break, and, you know, I bought a canister of stuff, and she said, well, if you join as a distributor, you get 25% off. And then she started talking about the training they were going to have. Then this was on a Friday, and Saturday they were having this big training, and you could learn more about the products is what she was pitching, but I knew what she was trying to do. But her name was either Marge or Marjorie or Margaret, something like that. She had come from Dallas, Texas, to visit family and decided to try and do a little business while she was here. She went back to Dallas, and I never seen her again.
There you go.
She married Sonny Snipes.
That's what it was. Yeah, but till to this day, I can't been able to figure out who she was or what her name was, or because it was crazy the way that happened, you know. But yeah, speaking of Earl Schoaf, he lived next to a guy named Marvin Went, who had joined Abunda Vita, and every 3 or 4 days he would be knocking on Earl's door saying, "Look, you got to come to the meeting. You got to at least check it out." Well, Marvin Went, he was working 60, 70 hours a week as a pants presser at Desmond's in Long Island, or Long Beach, California. And one day he forgot to call Marvin and tell him, "No, we're not going."
Wow.
So Marvin comes knocking on the door, right? Finally, he tells his wife, Flossie, "Look," and he'll leave us. He saw Dr. Jones. He heard the Napoleon Hill Laws of Success, and stayed for the Abunda Vita meeting and loved it and joined, and the rest is history. But the thing is, Marvin quit 3 weeks later.
Wow.
So it's a classic network marketing story. Either they invite you and don't show up themselves, or they get you in and then they drop off. Exactly. Same thing happened with Dale Calvert, who started with Shackley. He got started with Shackley, and a few weeks later, his sponsor and the guy's become a multimillionaire in the profession. It's just crazy.
Happens so much.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Well, so guys, we're gonna have to stop here. I got another interview to do. We could go on all day, and we will, because I think we need to do, Ron. We need to do another one. If we could get you again, I would love to get you and Larry and Ron, and maybe be a third person we can add to that. But let me first of all thank you, Ben, for your time. Second, all your amazing leadership, because this industry may not be here today without your leadership, quite frankly, sir. And thank you on behalf of the thousands of people that listen to our show. So thank you so much. And Ron, thank you, of course, for all the great stuff you're doing there with the Network Marketing Historical Society. And this is John Solleder, the name of the podcast, Leaving Nothing to Chance. Every single Tuesday, we're up on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and a host of other podcast stations around the world. So thank you both for your time, gentlemen, and thank you, listeners. This has been an amazing interview. I know I learned a lot. I got a lot of pages of notes here, so thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Leave Nothing to Chance. If you want to know more about what it takes to succeed in the network marketing space, join us again next week for another amazing episode. For additional resources and to connect with John Solleder, visit leavingnothingtochance.com. Don't forget to leave a review, and we'll see you next time.